Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Responsibility Quotient podcast. My name is Catherine Kowalchuk, and today is Monday, April the 29th, 2024. Today, I have a great speaker, lawyer, and colleague and friend. I think you in the truth community anyway will have heard of James Kitchen and what he has done in Canada to bring attention to human rights violations, especially since COVID, but he was with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms before COVID started. In any event, he's with me tonight, and so I hope you stay tuned and listen in on what he has to say and a little bit about the cases that he has undertaken, some of the successes, and where he sees things going for the legal profession, his experiences with the judiciary, and for Canada and the world at large. As I mentioned, he's a civil liberties lawyer who fiercely advocates for human rights, health freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, both in the courts and with various tribunals. He is the chief litigator for the Liberty Coalition Canada and Christian advocacy organization that seeks to restore freedom in Canada through litigation and social advocacy. He often discusses his many publicly litigated cases on podcasts such as this and through various media. As I mentioned, he was with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and in 2021, James launched his own legal practice. He has appeared before trial and appellate level courts in multiple provinces, as well as tribunals, as I've said, across the country. Among other things, he sues the government entities that have violated people's rights and freedoms and represents employees who have been wrongfully terminated, students who have been discriminated against on the basis of their religious beliefs, and professionals facing charges of unprofessional conduct. It's my pleasure to bring as my guest today, James Kitchen.
Thanks
Hi,
for having
James.
me. Hey, how you doing?
Well, I'm still kicking. Every day it feels like it's Groundhog Day in the world of bad news. But we still get up, put one foot in front of the other, and it's because of people like you fighting the good fight that we have reason for hope, and every day we have more and more Canadians waking up. So for that, I'm grateful.
I am too, and I'm very blessed to be able to have the fight. I consider it an honor to be able to do what I do, to fight for people's rights, to have such wonderful, principled people as clients who want to fight for their rights and not just take it and carry on and try to hide and think and hope that the government will just leave them alone as long as they don't cause a ruckus. I don't think that's right, and I'm glad that if I didn't have people, if there weren't people still in the country who wanted to fight and wanted to stand for what was right, I wouldn't have any clients. I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So I thank those people and I thank my clients, and it really is a wonderful thing to be able to do what I do.
Well, I'm grateful that I met you as well. I remember feeling very alone and isolated within my profession 4 years ago when the COVID hysteria launched in Canada. And I looked around the legal profession in Alberta, and I couldn't see anybody really resisting until I went to a few rallies, and I met some people, Doris Reimer being one of them, and we started Lawyers for Truth. And I know that you were with Lawyers for Truth for a little bit, and still, I technically still are, although Lawyers for Truth has not really been active in the last little while. Certainly, we did what we could during the COVID era to bring awareness about what we thought our laws were. On trying to understand the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I've, since come to learn that, the Charter was actually the worst piece of legislation we could have ever enacted in Canada. And we are suffering. What we are experiencing today is the direct result of that legislation that has fundamentally eroded our rights and freedoms, notwithstanding it claims to promote them. And it's destroyed, or it's helped destroy, in my opinion, the moral and social fabric of our society as we know it. And COVID was really hard for a lot of people, and I know that you were instrumental in helping people, employees, especially I think during that time, trying to navigate the system. But we're not really out of the woods, and we're still seeing the injustice continue, and we see these draconian pieces of legislation being tabled, and we can get into that maybe a little bit. And we also have governments still promoting the jab.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I know. I see that.
There's no accountability. There's absolutely no accountability. But I mean, I could rant and go on a monologue all night. But why I wanted you on was one to catch up with you, but to get a sense of what cases you have been taking on. I'd like you to summarize, some of the, more public cases, or any of the cases that you really want. And I know you have, you're going to a tribunal this week on the case with the Red Deer Catholic School trustee that was, I guess, forced to resign. Is that correct? For her views on transgender issues.
Yeah, yes. There's a lot to it, but that's a good summary. I'll discuss her case first. But generally speaking, I somewhat take the cases that come my way, but I also try to intentionally take certain cases that I think aren't being taken by anybody else because there's nobody else willing or able to take them, and also cases that I think are going to advance the freedom movement, or advance individual rights and freedoms. So, I look around and I mean, I'm a civil liberties guy, but I'm also a bit of a philosophy guy. So I look around and I see, what are the greatest threats to freedom? What are the biggest sources of tyranny right now? I mean, you can talk about it more from a principle perspective, but the actual manifestations in the world, I see transgenderism as one. I see COVID as one, and while COVID is essentially over sort of politically or socially, it continues on legally, of course, because the legal world takes 10 years to fully respond to an event in time. And I see climate change too, the whole idea that man is destroying the world, and so we have to take away everybody's rights and freedoms and tax them and all that to somehow save the planet. I mean, there's other ones, I'm sure, but those three in particular. Now, I don't have any climate change litigation. It's difficult to litigate in that area. But anytime there's a transgender type case or there's a COVID type case, I try to take those on because I don't see anybody else doing a good job of that, and because it matters to me, and because there's really nobody else that I think feels like they can, especially with the transgender stuff. At first, litigating against COVID was a terrible idea, even among civil liberties lawyers. I mean, if you go back to 2020, I was the lone voice at the Justice Center initially that was railing against this stuff, and people thought I was crazy. And so I was on that boat really early, and then it kind of came in vogue, and some more and more lawyers got on, and they litigated against it, and it was kind of somewhat acceptable. The transgender thing is tough because even among civil liberties lawyers, right, nobody wants to touch it. And it's interesting to know why, and this is just a sort of a commentary on the legal profession and how dangerous it is for it to become so monolithic and controlled the way it has in Canada. There's lots of lawyers that might disagree with sort of the trans madness or the trans tyranny, but they feel stuck. One, because they're usually working with other people, right, who only care about reputations and money and billable hours and whatever. So if they're a partner in a firm and they take a case like this, the other partners are mad at them. So they're stuck that way. Two, they might have a bunch of normal clients who might leave them. And so they feel stuck that way. Well, I can't sacrifice my billables or my income, right? I got to meet my obligations. And then there's just ones that are just plain old scared of what, their social class is going to think, or their friends, or whatever. And so they feel stuck. They can't take Monique Lagrange's case. They can't take Josh Alexander's case. I have a private case with a student at the University of Alberta who was kicked out of his program because he couldn't call a man a woman. Or sorry, it was a woman, and they wanted to be called a man.
He was what? He was a student?
He was a student. And so this is a private case, so I can't get into the details too much. But he was kicked out of his program at the university because he wouldn't call a woman a man. He's like, I can't do that because of my religious beliefs, right? So, so this to me is really, really awful. It's really, really insidious. The people who have religious beliefs, or maybe not even religious beliefs, just a matter of like a belief in the truth, and they want to be able to express themselves and not lie. That's the trans stuff, right? It's like whether you're a Christian or not, or Muslim or Jew or whatever else, even if you're not, the trans movement is you must speak a lie. Now, obviously the trans people think it's true, but other people saying, well, a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and you can't be the other, and you can't switch, and you can't all this stuff. And they say, I don't want to have to speak that lie. And the trans people are trying to say that, well, you must, and we're going to use the force of law against you. And think about how awful that is, right? You're being told that you have to speak a lie, or the laws. We're in a dark place when that's happening. So that to me is a big deal. And so anytime I have one of those cases, I try to take it if I can, because I don't see anybody else who's willing or able, partly because the legal profession is so captured in the sense that people feel like they got to make money, and they got to uphold their reputations. And I had one lawyer in particular who said, I don't know how you do this, because you'll just lose. Like, how do you not lose clients? And it just dawned on me that I didn't even think about that. I'm not even worried about that. Right. One, I wouldn't care if I lost some clients over it. Two, I just happen to be, because of the type of practice I happen to have all clients who believe in free speech. Not all my clients are Christian. Some of them have radically different views, but they're all fundamentally pro-free speech, at least to a degree. And so they don't care if I take some client that's different than what they are. Right.
And also I think, it's because of your faith probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, where that, when you're standing in the truth and doing the right thing, God has your back. Like we know that we will be provided for. And so those instances that people are afraid of, and I think that's what has kept a lot of people from speaking out and going along to get along about all of this is that fear, right? And so, but I know for me, it's my faith that like really COVID brought me definitively closer to God. And I was spiritual, and I believed in God, and I whatever spiritual means. I mean, I don't really know, but I do know that right now, like I'm proud to call myself a Christian. I've read the Bible during COVID, and I have a relationship with God now, and now I know what the difference is. And for me, I feel it in my heart, and that was one of the blessings of COVID. But I know that, it's so important for us. And I learned this from you. I think I really did learn this from you is, let's not live by lies. And I know you weren't the person who came up with that, but at the same time, I think that phrase in and of itself, it means everything to me. And it's kind of like my guiding value to when I face adversity and I don't really know what to do, that I know that I should not live by lies. And I try to not live by lies in all aspects of my life.
Yeah, and the hard part with all of that is convincing people that the cost they will pay is worth it. Because obviously everybody says, yeah, well, that's going to cost me. That's going to be
and it will. And it will.
Yeah, it will.
Rod Dreher. That's right. Yeah. Somebody just posted Rod Dreher. Yeah. He wrote a book, Live Not by Lies. I should actually go and bring it out. It's just over in my bedroom. So yeah, great book. Anyway.
Yeah, but I would just, and I mean, I've been saying this for years, but I just to live with integrity is worth the cost. It's worth the price. You will lose money, you will lose friends, you will lose status, you may lose access to services. I know we did during COVID, but it's worth it in the end, in a sort of intangible way, because you are at peace with yourself. You are comfortable with who you are. You can be pleased with the fact you're not a coward. You're somebody with principles, and that gives you sort of like an inner peace and an inner joy and an inner strength that is actually so much more valuable to life, to having a good meaning in life, than the money or the status or the comfort or the lack of conflict or whatever. And that's difficult to explain to people. And of course, I mean, I'm a lawyer, not a psychologist or a therapist, so I'm not the best at it. But that's what I try to help my clients or potential clients understand, is that that's worth it. And that's
I
a lot of
agree. I mean, honoring one's self-respect, like having self-respect is like the greatest honor you can give yourself. And when you're not in sync with the truth, when you're in my experience, that's when your life is haywire. I mean, it goes it's very easily for really kind of things to come your way that steer you away from that inherent human dignity that we all have. And that's certainly been my experience through COVID, but even before that, like through other trials and tribulations in my life, like alcoholism, and went through a bankruptcy, a whole bunch of different things. It was that adversity and self-respect that I think carried me through, and a trust in God ultimately.
Yep. And speaking of which, that's sort of the fundamental thing for the Monique LaGrange case is,
So
here's an example.
explain. Maybe you set it up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. so she's a Red Deer Catholic school board trustee. Okay. Now, most people might be vaguely aware that we have this double system of schooling in Canada. We have the regular secular system, which used to be Protestant, but just became regular secular, non-religious in any way. And then we have this Catholic system, which is parallel. It's right beside it. And the reason we have that is because it's constitutionally ingrained from this sort of negotiated settlement between the English Protestants and the Catholic French that started Canada in 1867. And that was something that the French demanded and got. And so that's how we get this nationwide Catholic system. And it is constitutionally ingrained that the system is allowed to be Catholic, i.e., Jesus is, he's the Son of God, and he's the King, and he's the only way to heaven. Anything to do with anything sexual or gender-wise that's not a married man and woman is sinful and wrong and disorderly. Like that's what the Catechism says, which is obviously is offensive. But as Jesus said, I'm offensive. Like this is the Catholic Church. It believes all the normal, like basic stuff that any regular biblical Christian believes, which is highly offensive to like a typical secular person. But that's what the Constitution guarantees, is that the Catholic churches are allowed to be that way, or the Catholic schools are allowed to be that way. Sorry. Now, the interesting thing is most Catholic schools are not. They're very, very secular. They're basically public schools with a cross on them. They're just as woke and just as liberal politically as the public schools, which is I'm not a Catholic, so it's fascinating and interesting to see that. Now, there's obviously a few exceptions, but that's the majority of them.
Well, I can tell you from my own experience, I went to Catholic school all my life, not being a Catholic. I was baptized, I think, United in any event, but we were pretty much a secular family. Like we didn't do any of, we didn't go to church or anything like that, but I went to a Catholic school. And the only difference that I could discern, I think, from public school was that we had religion class, and that we, did go to mass every now and then, but I certainly didn't learn anything about the religion. Like I can say that honestly, like I really didn't.
So
anyway, go ahead.
So Monique LaGrange is a non. So you get almost every school board trustee across the country is not just mildly woke, but significantly woke, right? That's just sort of who school board trustees end up being. You have your exceptions like the the guy in BC, Neufeld, and there's a couple in Ontario that have made the news, and now we have Monique LaGrange. So she is elected. She's one of two that I can tell that are not fully woke. So obviously she's in the minority, right? And I've seen this with school board trustees and municipal councilors. If they're not one of the woke majority on the board is typically trying to squeeze them out, or to shut them up, or to cancel them, or whatever, or to make them toe the line. That's just unfortunately is very common in those scenarios. So so she kind of like rallied against the board during COVID about the vaccine mandate and the mask mandate and all this other, sort of anti-freedom, potentially anti-Catholic type mandates that every woke institution had was at this Red Deer Catholic School Board. You got to imagine Red Deer is a pretty conservative area too. So it's not like she's representing 2% of the population. I mean, she's representing a significant portion of the population who wants to be free. So she posts this meme online, and she didn't do it in her official capacity as a trustee, just on her personal Facebook page, that said, brainwashing is brainwashing. That's what the meme said. And it had a picture of some kids waving Nazi flags. They were smiling, and they were waving the Nazi flags. And then you have some kids underneath, and these kids are like, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the old black and white photo. And then you have kids same age, maybe a little younger, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're waving Pride Progress flags. So this is the Pride flag with that triangle in it that is got the.
Now there's an umbrella on it, apparently, which means I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. Go ahead. Okay.
So the idea is, and it is communicated to most reasonable people. The idea is that, look, the kids waving the Nazi flags are not Nazis. They're just kids who have been given this flag and told it's good, and so they're smiling and they're waving it, and they have no idea what it means. They have no idea if they agree with it. Okay, they've been brainwashed into thinking it is good. Now we all think, I mean, Nazism is pretty much the epitome of evil in most people's minds. Culturally, that Hitler and the Nazis have represented the epitome of evil, even though they are evil, but not necessarily the most evil. There's plenty of other really evil things. But that's what they represent, right? And then you have these kids waving these pride flags. And again, it's the same thing. These kids don't know what it means. They don't know if they believe it. They don't know if they would believe it when they get older. They're just taught, they're told, they're indoctrinated, they're brainwashed into thinking this is good. And I believe this, even though I don't know what it is. And I'm going to celebrate it and promote it, right? And that's the problem. Now, the LGBT community and their allies would say, well, we don't have beliefs. We don't have ideologies. We just have what we say and what we think is true and how we act and how we live. But the outside world says, well, no. You obviously have a worldview. You have an ideology. Your ideology is that you can be whatever gender you want. You can have sex any way you want, with whoever you want, however you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. Absolutely no limitations. And everybody just has to celebrate you, and everybody just has to adore you. And there can be no talk of whether that's actually good or whether we should have sexual morality or any of that, because all that stuff is just like undermining your identity and boxing you in and discriminating against you. So, and then furthermore, not only is this actually a belief system, but obviously, the people who hold this belief system try to promulgate it. They try to spread it. They try to put it onto things, right? The pride flag has got to be everywhere, and we got to force everybody to use our pronouns, and we got to force everybody to do as we say. And so clearly, if it wasn't a belief system, there wouldn't be such a push to force it on everybody else. That's just what, there were all kinds of religious people that did that type of thing in the past. They forced it on other people, or at least that's what it felt like, the people having it forced on them. So it is an ideological belief system. So let's stop pretending it's not. And, a lot of people get that, right? So when they see this, they're like, okay, this isn't like anti-gay or anti-trans per se. We don't hate these people. We're not bigots. We're not trying to discriminate against them. We're just pointing an obvious fact that this flag represents ideology. The Nazi flag represents ideology. The hammer and sickle represents ideology. The pride flag represents an ideology. And whether we agree with that ideology or not, it represents an ideology. And when you give it to little kids and you tell them to wave it, right, you are doing the same thing that people who gave the Nazi flags to those kids and told them to wave it, right? You're doing the same thing. And this is where people, obviously the LGBT people would freak out at that. But a lot of regular people would say, yeah, I see that. I see the brainwashing. I see the indoctrination. And it's not okay. It might be okay if they were adults, They can choose, but they're kids. It's not okay, right? I mean, you wouldn't be okay with all kinds of other ideologies, religious or not, being promoted to kids who are too young to understand what it is. You wouldn't be okay with that. And so that's what this is all about with Monique LaGrange. And so the woke school board trustees, of course, they feel like, well, we have to discipline this. We have to punish this. This is wrong. We disagree with this. It's not part of our woke worldview, right? And so that's what they do. They discipline her. So this is where I got involved. She called around. She found out about me. She got a hold of me, and I represented her, made some submissions before the board, and the board decided to punish her quite severely. And to make my point earlier about the whole truth bit, what they initially did with her is they called her into sort of a quick ad hoc secret meeting and said, okay, we just need you to apologize and renounce what you did and recognize it was wrong and not do it again, and then we'll patch things up. And this is where most people would have just said, okay, fine, that's what I'll do, right? But she said, no, I didn't do anything wrong. I know I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to apologize. What I said was fine, actually. Sure, it offended people, but that's okay. My job as a trustee is never to offend anybody. It's to represent what I think is right. That's what I was voted in to do. And by the way, I'm a Catholic school board trustee, and Catholics actually kind of believe that this ideology underlying what the LGBT people believe actually is anti-Catholic, because it is. I mean, Catholic doctrine is married man, married woman with each other. That's it. You can't switch genders. You can't have sex with anybody. That's basic Catholic doctrine, and the LGBT worldview is antithetical to that. There's no controversy there. Just like it's antithetical to the Nazi ideology or the hammer and sickle ideology, right? So she doesn't do that. So that's when they have this hearing and they punish her. And then one of the sanctions is that she has to still issue that apology. And it's funny because it's like that punishment was setting her up for failure. The board knew she was never going to be able to apologize, that she never was going to apologize, because she can't, because that would be lying. When you apologize, when you know when you haven't done anything wrong, you're lying. And it's a self-serving lie. You're just doing it to get out of the punishment. That's wrong. People of principle and integrity don't do that. And they knew that. They knew that she wasn't going to be able to. So that was clearly setting her up for failure. So sure enough, she didn't apologize. Good for her. And both of us said from the beginning publicly, we're not going to apologize because we didn't do anything wrong. It would be lying if we apologized. And so sure enough, she talked a little bit to the media, not a lot. It was mostly me, but we talked to the media about the same things that I've just mentioned. And so they decided to launch a second complaint and bring her in for another hearing. And then this time they disqualified her, which what that means is it's effectively kicking her off the board. Right. Interestingly, when this whole thing started, their very first move, they voted to kick her off the board. Before they held a hearing, before they did an investigation, before there was a complaint, they voted to kick her off the board, and they wrote to the Minister of Education asking for him to make it happen. Okay. These people were so.
Okay, but let's back up a second here. She's elected, right? By people, like by elected. Constituents.
Yeah.
So does the board have that kind of authority that they can just do that?
The Education Act, which is recently enacted, it replaced the School Act, it's only a few years old, has a new section that says school boards can disqualify a trustee. Now, you can tell from the context of the legislation that the idea is mostly to be around things like conflict of interest or stuff like that, or going rogue and not following the board when they make a decision and then there's a dissenting trustee and then they decide to go rogue because they're mad about it. That's basically what it's geared towards. But it does say that if there's a code of conduct violation, and that's what the school board alleged, that there was a code of conduct violation, that you could theoretically disqualify a school board trustee. So this is the first case of its kind. This is the first case in Alberta where that section of the legislation, Section 87 of the Education Act, has been invoked to kick a school board trustee off a school board. So somewhat anti-democratic in a sense. But what I want people to realize is, so first of all, it's a very novel case. It's definitely groundbreaking, but it's very interesting to me, and I have alleged this as a procedural fairness problem. The school board, before they ever got a lawyer involved and before they ever did anything properly, they voted to kick her off. So before hearing the evidence, before hearing her arguments, before investigating anything, they voted to kick her off immediately. So it was a very emotional reaction, as it often is amongst the woke types, right? There's very little rational thought. It's mostly just emotion. We're mad at you. You've said something that we perceive to be bigoted against the LGBT community. We're going to light our hair on fire and cancel you. And we're going to be all emotionally motivated. And we're not going to care about due process because we don't care about that. We just care about our cultural hegemony and enforcing it. And so then they decided to call their lawyer. And so then they backtracked and they said, oh, well, we realized we shouldn't have done that. And so now we're going to hold this hearing. And so it was kind of a show trial to begin with. Like, we all knew where this was going. Hence the forced apology, which is setting her up for failure, which is going to allow them to have a second hearing to disqualify her down the road. So, but through it all, she's maintained her integrity, right? And she's lost her school board position. I mean, it's not like she's making a ton of money off of it, but it clearly meant a lot to her. She decided to run, right? And she served the first 2.5, 3 years of her term. But unlike most people, she kept her integrity and lost her position. Most people just would have apologized. You see it all the time. Someone says something that's probably truly what they believe, right, about the LGBT movement, and then they get caught, right? So they apologize because they're like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my reputation. I'm going to lose my position, right? I'll just issue some fake apology, right? That's what everybody wants, is this fake apology, right? And then I can carry on, right? She didn't do that. And so good for her. I mean, she's maintaining her integrity. But notice that, through all this, notice the fact that it's the Catholic school board. Like, interesting, right? Like, why do you have all these woke Catholic school board trustees that are kicking off the person who's actually upholding Catholic doctrine? As offensive as it is, she has a right to uphold it, constitutional right. She was elected to do that, right? These people feel so self-righteous about what they believe that they feel they should be able to do this, right?
So how are they justifying it? Like, what is the justification that they're?
Well, there's not much. I've been through the briefs here because, of course, I have my hearing in 2 days. This is before the Court of King's Bench in Red Deer. It's virtual. People can join it. It's going to be an open public hearing. A lot of people are planning to join.
When and what time, James?
2 p.m. on Wednesday, May 1st. It starts.
Okay.
And then it goes from 2 to 4:30. The next day on Thursday, 10 to 4:30, and then Friday, if we need it, it'll be from 2 to 4:30 again. So it's over the course of 3 days. My assistant tells me that the link is actually on the court website for Red Deer. So apparently the public can go in and get access to it, which I think is good. That's the way it should be.
Well, and can your assistant James send that link to me maybe, or
yes.
and then I can send it out too.
And I will note the Democracy Fund, which I imagine a lot of your viewers have heard of, is actually funding this case. So they saw the need for this case. I mean, obviously this is expensive, right? To take the school board to judicial review, it's not cheap. I have to do all this work. I have to write these great big factums, and then I have to prepare and show up at the hearing, and I have to go through this great big 200-page long record. It takes a lot of time, so it takes a lot of resources. So I thank the Democracy Fund for it, and I encourage people to show their support by donating if they want to. So that's Monequa Grange, and I think that case is representative of a problem across the country, right? Anybody who dare stand up to the trans tyranny is canceled, right? And so that brings me to my next case, which is Josh Alexander. And so again, you have to remember this is a Catholic school board. So Josh Alexander holds basic Catholic beliefs. Okay, boys can't become girls, girls can't become boys, and boys should not be in the girls' washroom. So this is a Catholic school board in Ontario who lets boys into the girls' washroom. Now think about that. Think about what that would have been like 15 years ago, right? During the Me Too movement and the women's movement, and keeping women safe, and the anti-rape movement, and all that stuff. I mean, most of it's good. I don't like women making up stories about men to ruin their lives, but I'm definitely in favor of no sexual assault by men against women. So it's interesting, right? Because that was sort of one of the left's big things. And then now that's to the wayside. So now it's suddenly morally acceptable for penises to be in the girls' washroom. And we're talking, these are teenage boys, teenage girls. So you got teenage boys. I mean, I was a teenage boy. I knew teenage boys. Obviously there's urges there, whatever you want to call them.
Well, there's a reason why there's a women's bathroom and a men's bathroom.
So, first of all, it's modesty and decency and feeling comfortable. I mean, my goodness, women should be able to feel comfortable in their spaces.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why that's controversial. So then there's the fact that you will just feel uncomfortable, and rightfully so. Maybe nothing will happen. Obviously, most trans boys who pretend they're girls or say they're girls aren't going to hurt girls, but some of them do, and some of them will. It's inevitable. And imagine that. I mean, we all know now from the last 20 years that, sexual abuse is one of the most traumatic things. It affects your mental health and your physical health and your psychological health for the rest of your life, or you have to go through significant trauma remediation if you're going to deal with it. It's awful. It's one of the worst things that can happen to you. And if you're a 14-year-old girl, it's the last thing you should have to deal with, right? And so this is a serious issue. Like, this is a serious issue of decency and morality and safety. And so, of course, being the brave young man he is, he spoke up about that, right? But he didn't do it as a jerk. He didn't do it just simply to bully these kids. He didn't actually approach any of these kids personally. He didn't bother them. He didn't try to block their access to the bathroom. He didn't threaten them. He didn't bully them. He just simply said, very, very directly, he just simply said, boys can't be girls. Boys are not ever girls. Boys should not be in the girls' washrooms. This is wrong. And I'm going to keep saying it. And by the way, it is what I believe biblically. Here's the verses to back it up. It is what the school is supposed to believe because it's a Catholic school. None of this is okay, and it needs to stop, right? And so the school board literally kicked him out of school for saying this. I mean, these are his religious beliefs, so it's religious discrimination, okay? They're calling it bullying when it's clearly not. He's not motivated by bullying. He's not bullying these kids. He's just simply saying something that they don't like because it disagrees with their worldview, right? And meanwhile, he's literally saying everything that the Catholic Church the Catholic school supposedly bases itself on. And so there was a secret, very, very secret hearing that only I was allowed to go to. Nobody else was allowed to go to besides me and Josh. There was 3 school board trustees there, and we made our case, and predictably enough, they completely ignored us and issued a secret decision. Secret decision. So there's a decision right now that only I have read, and Josh Alexander has read, the lawyer helping me has read, that has upheld the decision to kick him out of the school. Okay.
Why is it how is it secret? Can you explain?
Well, because they want it to be. Because they want it to be secret. Which is interesting, because if they're so sure they're right, why are they making their decisions secret?
Right? But under what authority can they make this secret?
Under their own authority, right? Now, it's wrong, it's unlawful. It's called a publication ban. It goes against the open court principle, and so it's unlawful and unconstitutional. Okay, and I have taken that decision to judicial review at the Ontario Divisional Court. And once I file my brief, which is currently being drafted by my associate, that brief gets filed, then my record gets filed, and in that record is that secret decision, and then I'll be able to share it with the world, because once it's filed with the court, they can't do anything about it. So it's basically, it's an abuse of power, right? You have these school boards or all kinds of these other government agencies, and they can do, in their own little world, they can do whatever they want. And they do whatever they want. They don't give 2 hoots about things like the open court principle. They just do it hoping they can abuse their power and get away with it, right? Because it takes people like me, and it takes resources, people willing to donate, and takes strong people like Josh Alexander to actually stand up and do something about it and push back and expose it. And most of the time, these entities just get away with it. People don't even know, right?
They do because of the stress, because of the cost, because of the time, because of the public ridicule. I mean, I've never met Josh, but I've certainly followed what he was going through. And I mean, what a brave man, like a young man, like he's, and I'm just shocked. Like, what are your thoughts on why are they what's going on with the Catholic Church? I mean, I know you're not Catholic, I'm not Catholic, but how is this, what's going on here?
Well, they are very timid and cowardly. They've been beat up a lot, and they've kind of fallen prey to that idea that you can apologize your way out of it, or you can appease your way out of it, right? So they've taken that tack overall of appeasement and apologizing to the left or to the LGBT community or to whatever, right? And of course, Francis is right in on that, right? He's seems to be pretty woke. So that's and that fundamentally, principally, that approach never works, right? I mean, obviously, I could use Chamberlain of World War II as an example, That's the famous one. But it just on a macro scale like that, or on a micro scale, it doesn't work. Appeasement and apologies don't work, right? I mean, there was that old adage a few years ago of, never apologize to social justice warriors, right? Because I mean, they're like sharks. As soon as you apologize, they smell blood, and so they're all the worse, right? And that's what I tell my clients, and that's my approach, is to never apologize. Now, if you've actually done something wrong, then I think you should apologize. I am a Christian, and I do believe there is a place for being humble and repentance and apologizing when you've actually done something wrong. But if you haven't, you don't apologize. And but I think that's fundamentally one of the problems. I'm sure there's others. One of the problems with the church, and this is definitely the problem with the Catholic school boards, right? They've taken this approach of, we're going to pretend we don't actually believe those things. We're going to apologize that we used to believe those things, even though technically we still do. And we're just going to appease. We're just going to constantly. So for the Josh Alexander case, it was mostly driven by one sort of trans activist kid at the school and his trans activist parents. His mother was like the leader of the local LGBT activist group, right? And they pushed the school board. And the school board basically did what they did to Josh, largely to appease this family, right? Because they were the LGBT family. They're the ones who get to be able to demand how things are going to go, right? Initially, when Josh was doing his thing, which initially started in October, there was a month-long period where the school wasn't doing anything. The school wasn't worried about it. The principal had a meeting with Josh. Sort of they heard each other out, and the principal just said, okay, we'll just be smart about it. There was nothing, right? And then, of course, we get a month in, and that family is beating down the doors of the school. And so finally the school decides, well, we have to appease the LGBT activists, so we have to take action, right? And then so they start drumming things up, and Josh plans this protest, and the school board smells blood and says, okay, he's planning this protest. We can make this out to be some terrible thing that we have to intervene on. And that was the original basis for why they originally suspended him. There was other suspensions and exclusions, and they arrested him. Of course, everybody probably remembers that. But the impetus for it was way back in October, November. The school board was quiet for a month. Then they felt like they had to appease the main LGBT activist in the school and decided they got to take action. And so they drummed something up and sort of made it look like, oh, well, we were always planning to do this kind of thing, right? This is how it goes, and sort of the real politic of how things work, right? And then they're stuck, right? They've made this terrible and lawful decision, but they have to go with it, right? They have to save face. And they can't just humbly back down and say we were wrong, right? They got to keep going. But the Constitution says you can be Catholic. So if a boy says, I want to go into the girls' washroom in a Catholic school, the Catholic school has the constitutional right to say, we have a religious belief that no penises in the girls' washroom. I know that's what the Human Rights Tribunal says, but the Human Rights Act is subject to the Constitution, and the Constitution allows us to actually be Catholic. That's literally what it says. Okay.
I know it says that, but in all, like, that's not what's occurring though. Like, practically speaking, and with these legal cases,
it's
that's not what's
because none
happening.
of the Catholic schools have decided to take that route. They've all taken the appeasement, apologizing route, and they've all said, well, we have to do this because the Human Rights Act says that penises have to be in the girls' washroom. That's literally what they said, but that's not true. But most people have believed them because, I mean, they speak with authority, right? People don't know the law about this. It's really complicated and nuanced, right? But that's really interesting, right? The Catholics fought to have this right in the Constitution, and now they explicitly reject it, and follow this path of appeasement and apologizing, and then they go and they kick out students who literally hold Catholic beliefs on gender and sexuality. It's bizarre. And it's wrong. I mean, it's unlawful, and it's wrong, and it's not like it's an interreligious fight. It goes to society, right? If you have a boy who says, my friend Jane, a girl, is really upset because there's penises in her bathroom, I'm going to say something about it. I'm going to do something about it, and I'm going to say that boys can't become girls because that's truth, and that's the truth that I believe. I mean, people should be free to do that. Obviously, I should go without saying, but in an open and free and democratic society, an equal society, people should be able to say that. And you know what? We obviously have a lot of tolerance in our society for people believing all these crazy things and acting on it. I mean, if we have a boy who thinks he's a girl and wants to act on it, we have a lot of tolerance for that. I don't necessarily think that's bad, but it needs to cut both ways. If that boy is gonna try to promulgate this belief that he's a girl, he's going to be criticized for that belief.
Yeah, but okay, so sure, yeah, ideally, but we have to realize what's actually happening, though. I mean, like, Christianity, like we are seeing Christianity is under attack. They do not want any um person who believes in God to be allowed to say anything or to have their views prevail, because they're regime changing us at the end of the day. Like, I mean, I just saw like this, I mean, we know about the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, this whole stakeholder capitalism, which is just there, it's the left's floofy language that just means communism. And so, I mean, that's what it means. So they're ushering this in, and I mean, communism is not based in God and Christian principles. It's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, or as you've already stated, like their worldview, is their own religion. I mean, that's how it's viewed in my mind, and that's why it's easy to single out this worldview as being cultish and etc. But that's what's happening, and we're allowing it. Canadians are allowing this to occur because we are too afraid because of the real life consequences. And I'm not downplaying the real life consequences. Obviously Josh got expelled from school. Like, I don't know what he's doing on that end. So there's that. He's also was cast into the national limelight. So that's forever going to, for better or worse, affect his reputation and impact his ability to potentially get employment, especially in this climate. I mean, like, and then we have a government, provincially, it's not looking good. I mean, Danielle Smith has chosen to keep SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity, in the schools in Alberta. Everybody was so proud of her, saying, oh, this is parental rights. But it's actually what she's done is she's codified this worldview into our law by basically allowing 16-year-old and 17-year-old minors take puberty blockers, which lead to other sterilization implication and consequences. She's allowing SOGI to be in the classroom still, and saying, well, the parents can opt out their children. Okay, but let's play this out to this logical conclusion. When I was during COVID, and I was trying to advocate for my children who were at the time, what were they, 13 and 9, and I was saying to them, look, you don't have to wear a mask if you don't want to. I will do whatever I can so you don't have to wear a mask. And they chose to wear a mask, not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid that they were going to be bullied and ostracized.
And they would have been.
And they would have been, not only by the students, but by teachers and adults. And so this is what's going to happen to these parents and to these kids who get pulled out of their SOGI class. They are going to be singled out, and it's going to create more division. That's what I predict. And I hope that's not the case, but I don't see how it goes any other direction, especially because their worldview is so dominant right now, and there's such little tolerance for any criticism whatsoever. And so you have that, notwithstanding that, she's going to bring in doctors to legal, to government fund doctors to mutilate people through gender transition surgeries. And then we have Bill C4 federally, changing the definitions of conversion therapy. We have Bill 63, under the auspices of Online Harms Act. Like, don't, heaven forbid you remove porn from the internet. You wouldn't want to do that because, there's too much money and depravity to be made off of that, those acts. You don't want to protect people that way. Instead, you want to create a different bureaucracy where you get to arbitrarily decide what's hate speech. And then all of a sudden you find yourself fined and in jail.
Yeah.
That's what's coming. That's what's coming.
There's so much I could say on that. But one thing that just occurs to me is, I mean, pornography is allowed on the basis their argument would be it's free speech. Meanwhile, the free speech of being able to say certain things that actually have a lot of meaning and value to the world about, hey, like boys can't be girls, and hey, maybe you should consider whether or not you really want to live that way, and I can help you do that. I mean, there's all kinds of stories of detransitioners, and all kinds of stories, by the way, of people who were living a gay lifestyle, and they found it killing their soul, and they decided to leave it. And there was people that helped them leave it, and they were able to change for the better from their perspective. I'm not saying from my imposed perspective, from their perspective. And so the federal government is saying, well, it's because of free speech, we got to allow pornography. And meanwhile, the free speech of let's talk about truth and let's talk about what's good for your life, that's being criminalized. I mean, think about the hypocrisy just right there, right? And this goes back to what you said, right? The money. I mean, so much about the COVID thing, right? It's all about the money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the pharmacy, we got to have the COVID shot. Well, what was really going on there? Well, I mean, to those of us who were awake, I mean, a big part of it was obviously the money, right? Really? Suddenly we believe and trust Pfizer and that they're just doing this for the common good. It's not about the billions of dollars, right? And then, of course, predictably, right, the whatever you want to call them, blankety blank blank, puts the DNA in their vaccines. And it's the conspiracy theorists who are like, well, I don't want to take that. It could be genetically altering me. And meanwhile, they're bloody well right. And there's DNA in the damn things. And then now, it comes out and it's official and Health Canada's talking about it. And it's like, yeah, this is exactly what we were warning all you people about. This is a company that only cares about money. It's only ever cared about money. And, you guys clearly are just a bunch of money grubbers. And that's all this is ever about. And it's wrong. And sure enough, right? So anyways, so just to finish on the Josh Alexander case, that is being funded by Liberty Coalition Canada, which is a great organization. It's similar to the Democracy Fund and the Justin Center insofar as they raise donations, crowdfunding. They get donations from people, and they pay for my work to do these cases. And they're explicitly Christian, and they're the only one that is, and they do that on purpose. It's not to offend people. It's because, in a free country, you should be able to do that. The Democracy Fund and the Justice Center are sort of, they're secular, they're non-religious. But the Liberty Coalition Canada is explicitly religious. I'm explicitly Christian. I'm fine with that, even if other people aren't. And so we take cases like this, and so I would encourage people to donate towards the Josh Alexander case. We were only able to continue that case because in January, I went on a talk show by it's called Talk Truth with the Huntsbergers, and I pleaded with people to donate so we could do that. I do a ton of free work, okay?
Yeah.
But I can only do so much.
I know you do, and I do know that your rate is significantly lower than many lawyers. James, is it okay if I put the links to the Democracy Fund and Liberty Coalition Canada on my social media and on my website so that people know how to directly fund you?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I do. I ask. Some people might think this is terrible, but I'll tell you right now, everybody needs to really understand that I could easily go off into the blue and make a ton of money and quietly live my life with a ton of money and just get it all from doing regular stuff. I don't have to be doing this. I make a lot more money doing something else. I don't get paid to do these podcasts. I do it because I care. I actually care about humanity. That's why I do what I do. I got to make a living. And so obviously there's an element of, I guess, self-serving by saying, hey, please donate towards this case. But I'll tell you right now, I can make a lot more money off doing whatever case for whatever corporation. I've explicitly chosen, I feel called by the Lord, actually, but I've explicitly chosen to do my cases publicly and to advocate publicly and to inform the public and to, do some of it free and do a lot of it for discount and to take the risk if the money doesn't come in and just tell people, look, if you want to see this happen, if you support this, please donate. I believe in my work. I think I do good work. I expose a lot of that work to the world for them to see, to know where their money's going, and to also to be able to see what the arguments are. And I do boldly ask for donations to the Liberty Coalition Canada and the Democracy Fund for the cases that I do, because I think this is a really important part of advancing freedom and democracy. Doing these cases, doing them publicly, holding these bodies accountable, and showing the bodies and the courts and the public that this matters and we care about this and we're willing to sacrifice and to make this happen.
So do you even think that, James, I mean, you can share with the audience what successes you've had, but like by and large, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I've done COVID cases regarding the vaccines, didn't go well. I tried to typically steer people away from the courts, typically in my family law practice, as a matter of like just prudent practice, because you just never know what you're going to get. You know, you don't know if you're going to catch the judge on a bad day or not, or who knows, anything can happen. I mean, that was always the case in my practice, and I've, you know, practiced for over 20 years, but it's even more, it's unpredictable, but then it's yet predictable. Like there's certain things that I will, you know, if somebody comes to me with, you know, I don't want my child to get the jab, typically in a divorce case, and I explain to them like, the case law is not on your side, and even with the plethora of information that has come out about these things, you know, it's still, it's in the consciousness of the judiciary that what the government, their mandate, or even if it's not a mandate, even a recommendation, is okay. And let me like just digress a little bit more. Like Danielle Smith is now, her government, AHS, is not mandating, recommending the jab every 3 months, the mRNA jab every 3 months for people as little as 6 months old. And so, you know, her excuse for this, her get out of her own jail free card for herself, for her own conscience, is that, well, she's not making it mandatory. It can be a recommendation, and to me that is actually, it's horrible. You have to ban it for this reason. It's because we have a court system, and we have doctors, and we have the medical profession who believe whatever the government tells them to believe. And so when a government authority says, we recommend the mRNA jab for people every 3 months at 6 months old and up, that's just as bad as mandating it. Because if the government, we're in a state of delusion right now, that if the government recommends it, like government has become our secular society's god, and they will just take whatever this government says, and it's almost impossible to refute because, well, it's the government. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, it's two things. One, you know, I'm disappointed in the lack of moral courage and the lack of moral leadership on the part of our premier, obviously. But at the same time, you know, I want to put a little bit of the onus on the people, and I want to both challenge them and give them some hope on that, legitimate hope. I don't give a lot of that very often. So going back to what you said earlier, right? Danielle Smith, she did a little bit of the right thing, but she left a lot of the right thing undone, right? Soji's still in the schools. 16-year-olds can still get their breasts lopped off and get a fake penis put on their vagina from the forearm skin. If you've seen that, it's disgusting. They can take the puberty blockers. They can ruin their life. They can end up like Chloe Cole and, you know, got a deep voice and can't breastfeed and all the rest, right? So she failed to do the right thing on that. But, and that's wrong and unfortunate. But she went, I think, as far as she thought the Overton window allowed her to go, right? Yeah. And who sets the Overton window? The public does, right?
100%.
Well, that's actually interesting, right? The Overton window was not as big, was not that big a few years ago, right? The trans madness has sort of reached its peak, and it's actually just starting to come down. And you see this a lot in the UK. The UK is ahead of us on that. They reached their peak before we did in madness, and now they're coming back down the other side of the mountain towards rationality. And so all that crazy trans stuff is going away in the UK. Canada's following suit, okay? So, which is actually good, and I think there's some hope there for that. But so look at that. She did there what she thought she could do. That's as far as the Overton window was, which is interesting because that's bigger than the Overton window used to be. So yay, by the way, that's because some people have taken my advice and they've not self-censored, Okay. They haven't covered their mouth. They've gone out and they've
Yeah.
spoken about the madness, and they've called it
Yeah.
madness for what it is. Right. And that's good. And so they moved the Overton window, and she was able to move with it. And so that's good. And what I would challenge people to do is continue to talk. Continue to call it what it is. It is madness to think you can switch your sex. It is madness for penises to be in girls' private spaces or women's private spaces. It's madness for men with, male genetics in female sports. It is all madness. It is all tyranny. Call it what it is. Take the risks. We're a month away from the celebration of all this madness. Okay, Pride Month, June. I encourage people. Okay, don't try to be insulting or try to be a bigot or whatever, but just boldly say the truth and
Well,
count the cost. You won't take the risks, because you know what will happen? You will move the Overton window, and that matters, because think about how many less girls will have their breasts lopped off. Think about how many less girls.
For sure.
This is an important. This isn't some little thing, right? This is
Well,
important.
and this is one of the things, why I called this podcast in this project the responsibility quotient, because it really boils down to ourselves taking personal responsibility for the quality of our life and our experience here, right? So we cannot rely on a politician. We can't rely on any one person that's going to save us. And, to the people that support the politician that is not going far enough in either their changes to the legislation or holding people accountable. Well, who is that really a reflection on? Like Danielle Smith, in fairness to her, she's, like you said, she's kind of gauging where the public's at here, and she's still getting a round of applause from her base, thinking that what she's done is a victory for parental rights, when in fact it's actually not. Like I was stunned when she made the announcement, going, well, we're okay, so now it's official in Canada, in Alberta, we are a society that believes in this lie. 100%. We believe in this lie, and that's how we're going to conduct ourselves going forward. And we're going to, and further, one of the, anyway, so I just go, it is up to us as individuals, and we have to, we don't have to, you look at some of the lefts when they lose their mind and they start screaming, they literally just scream. They just scream, and that's their rebuttal. That's their argument. It's no words, just screaming. And we don't have to be like that. We can be rational. We can be calm. We can be respectful. And look at, I'm going to be interviewing a transgender individual in a couple of weeks, actually. I know I've known for years. And Monica is I respect the dignity of Monica as a person. I don't have to agree with Monica's lifestyle. And the whole thing for me has always been, you do you, but leave our children alone. Okay.
Yeah.
Do not have this in our schools. Get it out, get this political indoctrination, this political worldview out of our schools. If we're going to be this secular society where there's going to be no religion of any kind, then this is part of it as well. But the thing is that I hope that's where it goes. I hope we can shift it by with people expressing themselves. And right now I think that's the only civil, peaceful way to do it, because the courts, by and large, and the tribunals, these boards that have all this power that they've given themselves, they're not doing the right thing.
Yeah. And now I know we're probably running out of time.
No. I've go ahead.
So you asked about successes. So, I'll admit I haven't had a lot, overtly legally, as far as successful court cases or whatever. That's not actually my goal. I mean, I do excellent work. Excellence is a priority for me. We make the best. I have an associate that helps me. We try to make the best arguments, and we try to make sure that if we lose, it's not because we deserve to. and we're ready to lose. We lose most of the time because of the politics and because we take the cases that nobody wants to give us a win on for political reasons. But we make darn good arguments, and we rarely, if ever, deserve to lose. I have, so last week, for example, I had a Liberty Coalition Canada case. This is the case of Juan Porter. So she's a Christian woman. She's an occupational therapist. I think it was an occupational therapist, but a specialized one. She worked with babies, premature babies often, in a hospital in Ontario. So she's Christian. She can't take the shot because of her Christian beliefs. She follows the law. She explains her beliefs to the hospital, and they discriminate against her by saying, nope, we don't think you're Christian enough, not good enough. We don't think those beliefs are valid enough, which is totally against the law. And so they denied her religious exemption, and they fired her. So I sued the hospital on her behalf. This is a Liberty Coalition Canada case. It was crowdfunded. It's public. It's on our website. And now I'm going to get a little bit cagey on this because there has been a settlement. Okay. So the case was resolved last week. I can't tell you how or why. I can just tell you I was happy with it, and you can infer that from that what you will. On Porter's happy. I would call this resolution to this case a success, and so for me that's legally a success, right? Whether you win in court or whether ultimately there's somebody that's held accountable and somebody gets the resolution they want. Both are victories. Not exactly the same, obviously, but both are victories, right? That means something. She had that fight. It was a public fight. People saw it, and she didn't back down. She didn't capitulate. She didn't abandon the case. She continued on until she got a resolution. And I have a number of cases. Some I've resolved or settled a whole bunch of cases that are private that nobody ever knows about because I don't talk about them. I have like 100 and something cases. I can't talk about them all. But so these are successes both on the individual level, right? Somebody is vindicated. Somebody's given compensation. But sort of on the larger level too, of these people are held accountable, and then I'm able to talk about the story sometimes and give people encouragement and hope and tell them like, look, the fight is worth it. Sometimes it's just a matter of fighting and staying in the fight, right? Another case I had, a COVID case, was a church in the Vine, which is a church in Edmonton. Public health inspector wanted to come in on Sunday during worship, come into the sanctuary, right? Spy on them. And the church said, no, you're not going to spy on us because the whole purpose of you coming in here on Sunday during worship, and by the way, you can't come in here because you're clearly here for a bad purpose, and this is a spiritually sacred space. But the whole purpose of you coming in here is to try to shut us down. You're spying on us to get evidence to prevent us from worshiping God Almighty. We're not going to let you do that. And so they were fined $80,000. And the Democracy Fund hired me to run this case. We ran it publicly. Right. And we fought and we fought and we fought. We went to the provincial court and we lost predictably. We went to the Queen's Bench and we lost predictably. We went to the Court of Appeal. Now, at the Court of Appeal, I had to ask for leave to appeal. And sure enough, the Court of Appeal granted me leave to appeal. And then just before we were going to go into the actual appeal itself that I got leave on, the Crown capitulated. They said, nope, we give it up. And they got their $80,000 back. They were vindicated. Right? They didn't really win in the end, but the point was that they kept fighting, and in the end, right? They won in the general sense, right? Sometimes it's just fighting, right? I don't know what's going to happen.
I know.
The case or the Monique LaGrange case, we might win, we might lose, but the fight itself is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes I have success, sometimes I don't. But even the fact that we did fight and we fought well is for me in and of itself a success, right? My clients feel, satisfied and vindicated and at peace with themselves that they did what was right and they fought. They didn't just give up. Maybe they lost, maybe they didn't, but they fought and they fought well and they fought for the right thing, and the fight itself matters. And so for me, that's part of the success. And a lot of my clients understand this. I'm not a guy who can say I've won all these court cases, right? That's not why people hire me. They hire me because they know that I'm going to fight for them with excellence and fierceness, and we're doing the right thing. And if we lose, it's not because we deserve to. And hey, heck, we might win if we just fight. And that's been a big thing for me personally and professionally. It's a big thing I encourage people to do. And you do meet success I mean, you gotta remember, if you fight with integrity and principle, the other side doesn't have that. Governments don't have that. These tyrants don't have that. It's all power, right? That's all they care about. That's not a principle, right? These people don't have integrity. They'll do whatever to maintain their power or get their money or whatever. When people with integrity and principle come and they stand their ground and they don't move, the other side tends, not always, but usually tends to wither in the presence of somebody with so much integrity and principle. Right. And they eventually, they're not motivated to continue to do the fight forever. Another case, Dr. Curtis Wall. I'm still fighting that case. This is a mask case. It's been going on for 3.5 years. I'm still fighting that. The College of Chiropractors of Alberta has spent, over $600,000 persecuting this guy, and he hasn't thrown in the towel. He's still fighting. I'm still fighting. We're going to keep going. And the other side, the college hates the fact that we're still going, but we are, because it's about principle. It's about truth. It's about what's right. The masks didn't work. They were harmful, and we're never going to stop saying it, and we're going to keep fighting until we literally can't fight anymore. And we're going to hold them accountable. And in that case, obviously, is as well. It's public. It's on the Liberty Coalition Canada website, and I encourage people to donate to support that one as well. So listen, and if you got more questions, I'd love to answer them. But I've talked a lot about my cases and me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate you coming on and sharing this information. I mean, I'm encouraged by your kind of enthusiasm for the fight this long into, like, I know you were a human rights lawyer before COVID, but certainly this resisting this tyranny and is exhausting. So I think what you're doing is admirable. And I certainly, I think that there's a place for it. I think that I do agree that certainly we fight. I mean, there are many ways that we can do it. Speaking out is one way. Litigating is one way. Getting involved with your city council, or there are a myriad of ways that we can influence people, and you've chosen this to be as your passion, and you're brilliant at it. And I do think that it is inspiring. And I know for the limited number of cases that I've taken in this realm, my clients needed to do it because they needed to know that they did everything that they could do in order to try to protect their kids. And as a mom, I can't disagree with them, right? Like, these are our children. They're our most, these are our precious beings that we need to nurture and care for and look out for. And we need to do all we can do to protect them. And so it's unfortunate that our justice system is so upside down that, the access to justice issue, and it's usually long and drawn out and strategically used against litigants, especially those who don't have any funds to fund it. But certainly it's something that I can relate to as a mom myself, but also as a lawyer. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And the last thing I'll say about this, and it's by no means easy, but one of the things I try to do is I try to expose the issues with the court to the public, and then the public has to do with it what they will. But there is something they can do, and I'm probably going to continue to talk about this for the next 20 years. But the public needs to realize that they do have some say in who our judges are. Our judges are political appointments. And if they don't like those political appointments, then they need to change who they're politically voting for, right? If you want somebody who's going to uphold your rights and freedoms as a parent, or uphold the rights and freedoms for your children, or give you the society in which government is actually limited and there's less tyranny and more freedom, whether it's health freedom or religious freedom or free speech, then you need to think long and hard about who you're voting for and who they're going to appoint on the bench. As Canadians, we don't tend to do that. And so we kind of get a little bit of what we deserve with these awful judges. Okay. You do have some say over the composition of our court, right? And
I agree with you. Like, and I think that is really lost for a lot of Canadians. and one of the things, because I ran in the last election, and there's so many people, first of all, that surprised me that don't vote, have never voted, could care less to vote, don't want to get involved, whatever. So there's that contingent of people. And then
Yeah.
there's the people that keep on voting because they, they like the blue potato, or they like the, the red potato. And so they vote because they've always voted that way, or because the media has told them to, or whatever. And so, that is such an important message, because some people have been telling me, oh, Catherine, this isn't there's no political solution here, what's going on is spiritual. And I say to them, yes, it is a spiritual war that's happening, but we fight it here in this realm, in the environment that we have currently, and that's politics. And so if you vote for people who lack the character, don't share your values, have their integrity is constantly called into question, they did nothing during the past 4 years to stand up for your rights, then you really have nobody else to blame but yourself. If you vote for them, if you continue to vote for them, again, personal responsibility. And so, but trying to convince a mass of people because they're afraid of, the orange potato, it's like, I always say pain is a touchstone for change. I don't want it to become super painful for people, but that's how we learn.
This is tough because this is a long-term game, and I recognize that. I'm in this game for the long run. It will take decades to get lawyers promoted to the courts who will uphold rights and freedoms because they value that. That's their value system. Yeah. It will take decades to do that. But it is possible. I mean, it may not happen, and Canada may just evolve into a third world tyrannical nation, and that would be very sad. I don't think it's inevitable. It doesn't have to go that way. But I would encourage people to take this long-term, long-game approach, the Wilberforce idea of it's going to take me 30 or 40 years, but I'm going to right this injustice of slavery. We can look at this, and I'm going to right this injustice of all these judges who just uphold this, left-wing socialist, big government, anti-individual rights and freedoms worldview. I'm going to do what I can to fix that. And I'm going to start talking about it, and I'm going to start making it an electability issue, and I'm going to start making it a big deal like the Americans have. Okay. And we can look at what this looks like, right? The Americans did more to safeguard their rights and freedoms for their children for generations, decades to come by electing Trump. Why? Because Trump appointed 3 judges who are going to generally, not always, they're not perfect, but generally they're going to uphold the constitutional rights of individuals and limit government, right? And whether Biden or Trump wins the next election, those 3 are still there, right? They're still forming that conservative majority that are upholding the constitutional rights of people. And so the Americans have done more to entrench that for them for generations to come than any individual election. And the Americans realize that, or at least the freedom-minded ones realize that. The freedom-minded Canadians need to realize that, need to catch up to the Americans on that. And so, for example, how you do this is Pierre Poilievre is probably going to win the next election. I know I'm not saying his name right, but you know who I'm talking about. The Conservatives are probably going to win. Great. Well, what you have to do is make that an issue for him, right? Keep pounding down the door. Do whatever you can to make him appoint actual conservative, freedom-loving judges. There's not a whole lot of lawyers left in the country that believe in freedom, but there's enough that we could fill all the courts in the country, okay?
Yeah.
And unlike Harper, he needs to actually appoint real rights and freedoms lawyers and not just, ones that are less liberal than, Chief Justice Wagner. We need to make that an issue. And I plead with people, and I know people, it's going to take decades before they listen to me, and I get it, but I'm just going to keep saying it because that is one of the fundamental ways you turn this country around in the long run. There's only so much the federal government can do to destroy America in the States. They are, but they can't do it as completely as Canada. Why? Because there's still a significant body of judges, especially at the Supreme Court, that can hold them accountable and keep them back. And we're missing that in Canada, right? There's only so much I can do. I do a lot, and I'm glad to do what I do, but there's only so much I can do because I pretty much never encounter a rights and freedoms oriented judge. I just don't. And that's up to you, the people, to fix that, right? I can fight for you, and I will, and I'll do a good job, but you have the power over the years to change who I'm appearing in front of so that I can actually win, right? Freedom people actually win in the US. They win their court cases sometimes because some of their judges actually believe in that and actually uphold that, and they're not scared to, right? And I think this is a big challenge, but a big source of hope, legitimate hope, long-term hope, but legitimate hope for people in Canada and the freedom movement who want to address this. I don't hear anybody else talking about it. So I hope to set a trend and people start talking about it. We have all these podcasts about it because I think that's going to be huge.
I think so too. And, one of the things that I'm always reminded about is that, it's really, even if we are successful in just changing one person's heart and mind, then we're doing our job according to the Bible. And it doesn't feel like a victory and a win when that happens because it's so small and insignificant. So we think, but I think that really that's the ripple effect. And, all you need is really that to change that one person, and who knows where that will lead. So James, thank you for coming on tonight. Thanks for providing that hope. And thanks for the fight that you continue to fight, even though, you're often the underdog or your clients are the underdog. But we do need you in this space, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to make sure that I get your links up so that people know to where they can donate and support you and your clients. Do you want to rattle it off just quickly? If you know the websites, just so we can tell people where to go.
So it's Liberty Coalition Canada. I think it's .com. It could be .org. But if you type in Liberty Coalition Canada donate, you will find it. Even I think on the skewed Google, you will find it. You'll see a picture of me. You'll see the cases there you can read about, and there'll be a donate button, and you can donate towards our cases. And of course, the Democracy Fund, the same thing. If you look up the democracyfundcanada.com, you'll find them, and they have a donate button. And there you go. It's they make it as easy as they can. It's not difficult. If you're interested in donating, you'll be able to.
Okay. Well, let's keep in touch. Hopefully we can chat again. I'd like to, find out how your case goes with Monica LaGrange. I hope you get some good results and that she gets the justice that she deserves, and that and we get a win. I mean, it would be nice to get a win and start changing the trajectory of where we see things going. But in the end, thanks, James, for coming on, and we'll do it again sometime.
Yes, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.